Thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. Today we take a look at the strange disappearances of the missing 411 cases. Many years ago, a man named David Paulides had retired from being a homicide detective. He had a great record on the force and was a clear-headed guy. Once he retired, he took a job working security for a couple of billionaire Silicon Valley philanthropist types. One day at the office with his bosses, they all began discussing their own personal Bigfoot encounters. Knowing that David Paulides was a retired, top-notch police investigator, these billionaire businessmen hired him to go investigate Bigfoot for them. He spent years doing this and has compiled some of the best evidence for Bigfoot, DNA evidence, and other such physical proof. During his Bigfoot research, though, he once stayed at a motel near a national park. Late at night, he had a knock on his hotel room door and discovered multiple park rangers standing there, wanting to talk to him. These park rangers were familiar with his work on Bigfoot, and they wanted him to investigate another type of case, another type of occurrence. These park rangers had seen over the years a rash of supposedly connected mysterious disappearances. Now, these disappearances can be described as very strange. Of course, national forests have people that go missing and bad occurrences regularly. However, the disappearances they wanted him to look into were much stranger. People were regularly going missing. When their bodies were found, they'd be found in strange positions, often in shallow creek beds, often with their pants pulled down or neatly folded next to them. When kids would go missing, they'd be found many miles away from where they disappeared. Baffling search parties as to how these children, who were sometimes as young as 4 or 5 years old, would go missing and then be found so far away. Often after these victims went missing, major snowstorms would break out, hindering search parties. As he looked into this, he found more and more cases with strange connections. Genetic connections, name connections. He found in certain areas many Germans would go missing and Ukrainians. Other areas he'd find special needs people, people with disabilities. But very often there would be overlapping aspects of these cases. For instance, in one park, within a very short time period, 2 kids went missing who had very similar names. Also, when these search parties would bring scent dogs to look for the people that were missing, the dogs would often refuse to follow the scent. They would lie down, whimper, put their tail between their legs. Behavior that their handlers had never seen them exhibit before. You can purchase his books online if you look up The Missing 411, and he has his own YouTube channel if you'd like to watch, where he regularly goes over strange and bizarre missing people cases. Let's look at some such stories. Ida Mae Curtis's story. In 1868, a 3-year-old girl disappeared from her father's lumber camp in northern Michigan after enlisting the help of a pair of professional hunters who happened to be on the historical search scene by chance. The men traced the girl's feeble cries to a dense stand of brush. When the men advanced on the thicket, they saw what they said looked like a giant bear burst from it and run across the river, heading for the distant horizon. The men recovered the girl unharmed from the brush. She later told them that Mr. Wolf would not let her leave, and had eaten her hat right from her head, although he had also gathered some berries and fed them to her. On the night of July 2nd, 1955, Miss Curtis, summoned by her distraught older children, arrived just in time to see what she and the children said was a huge bear cradling her 2-year-old daughter, Ida Mae Curtis, in its front paws, as it scurried off on 3 legs from their tent in the lumber camp in the Wild Kootenai National Forest in Montana. On July 4th, after a search by 350 backwoodsmen in heavy rain, Ida was found dry and safe in a crudely built shelter across a river, just 300 yards away from where she was taken. Ida would later relate, to the best of a 2-year-old's ability, being cuddled and comforted by a bear during the time she was missing. The sheriff became so angry that he actually paid the Curtseys 3 separate visits, demanding that they stop telling their story of a bear abducting and caring for their little girl. He told them, "Quit telling that story. It could never happen. It didn't happen, and don't say it anymore." Paulides told the story of Lillian Carney on Where Did the Road Go? On December 20th, 2014. The following is a summary of the story. Lillian was from Mazardis, Maine, which is 15 miles west of the Canadian border and surrounded by lakes, rivers, and ponds. She was 6 years old. She went missing August 8th, 1897 at noon. Lillian and her parents went blueberry picking. People going missing while picking berries is a theme in these cases. They were there for a short amount of time, and the parents said she just vanished. They searched for an hour. They got some people in the area to help. By the morning, there were 200 searchers there, calling for Lillian. Paulides said when searchers are looking for someone, they call the person's name, say that they're there and that they're their friend, and they want to help. Paulides said in missing 411 cases, the searchers never get a response, which is strange if people are lost, cold, and hungry. On Tuesday, around 300 residents arrived to search, and at 10 a.m., a guy named David Paulides found her, somewhere between 2 and 3 miles where her parents last saw her. While Lillian didn't say a lot, she made an interesting statement. She said, "The sun shined all the time I was in the woods." Paulides pointed out that that's a weird thing for a 6-year-old to say.
Evil one, deliver me.
From the evil one, deliver me.
At the hour of my death,
At the hour of my death,
call me and bid me to come to thee.
call me and bid me to come to thee.
Give me the compass. If you don't, we'll take her eyes. We'll take your family's eyes. We'll make this whole town blind.
Deliver me.
At the hour of my death.
At the hour of my death.
Probably should have come here first.
Come to thee.
Call me and bid me.
In the news articles about the case, it had said the weather was partly cloudy, and she had spent 2 nights outside and was missing for 46 hours. So very peculiar that she would describe her situation as being in the sunlight for 2 days. Paulides told another story in an interview with George Knapp on Coast to Coast AM. A 3-year-old boy, John Doe, disappears from his parents in Mount Shasta along a creek river where people go flyby fishing on October 10th, 2010 at 6:30 p.m. Paulides said people seem to go missing between 2:30 and 6:30 in the cases that he's researched. Paulides also said that people say strange things happen in this area. There are beings called Lemurians that live under that area of the mountain, and Bigfoot and UFO sightings as well. Parents contacted the sheriff, who started a search, but they don't find him. They did find him 5 hours later at 11:30 p.m. at night, sitting in a thicket. The boy didn't say anything. He's taken home. He's in a state of stunned disbelief. They talk to him and ask him what happened the next morning. He tells a story that he's taken into a cave that he thinks was underground. He said he knew it was dark outside, but when in the cave, he could see light coming in from the entrance the whole time he was there. He said he was with a woman who looked like his grandmother, and that he thought it was his grandmother. In the cave, he saw other things that looked like people, but they seemed to him as robots as they weren't moving. After a while, he figured out the woman was not his grandmother, even though she was nice and polite to him. This young boy decided that perhaps she was a robot, and there was a strange and unusual light emanating from her head. The more suspicious this young man got, the more she started to get pushy. He claimed that she took out some sticky paper, put it on the ground, and asked him to defecate onto it. He said he didn't have to go, and she got mad. He said that while in the cave, he saw guns and things around the perimeter of the cave, but that they had dust on them. Once found, the boy spent time with his grandmother the following weekend and told her the story. The grandmother then told Paulides that 3 weeks before the boy disappeared, she and her husband were at the same creek where he went missing, spending the night. They woke in the middle of the night because the grandmother felt a pain at the base of her neck. Her husband looked at it and there was a small bloody spot at the base of the neck. She didn't know if this was related to the boy's disappearance, but found it strange. The boy is fine and has not disappeared since, but it is by far one of the most unusual stories that Paulides has encountered in his investigations. There was another case of a man named Stephen Kubacki, who went missing for 15 months, then woke up in a field wearing different clothes. In February 1978, Stephen, a student at the time learning German, went missing in the Michigan area, an area known as the Great Lakes Triangle, which is written about in a book by Jay Gurley that talks about the disappearance of hundreds of ships, boats, and aircraft. Stephen said he was going to go skiing. They found his skis and his poles on the beach by Lake Michigan and footprints on the ice leading up to the lake. They flew over it. The footprints appeared to stop, as if he disappeared from the middle of the lake. They found his backpack in the same general area. On May 5th, 1979, 15 months later, Stephen walked up to his father's door and said he didn't remember much. He woke up in Pittsfield, 40 miles from his father's house, lying in a meadow wearing clothes that weren't his. He had a small satchel beside him with maps that also weren't his. And where he woke up was 700 miles from where he went missing on Lake Michigan. Reporters asked him if he would talk to someone. He said he didn't need to, because he didn't have any psychological problems. After 1983, Stephen got a master's in linguistics and a PhD in clinical psychology. In another case as far away as France, Paulides talked about a woman in France who was walking along a river in the 1950s. She saw a dark-colored hand and it grabbed her and dragged her behind a thorny bushed area. She began to scream when she heard a voice above her say something. At about that time, the weather started to change immediately to thunder and rain. The voice said something like, "Well, here you go," as if he was delivering her. Then all of a sudden it stopped and she ran to a nearby farm. The farmer said he could see a large handprint that had grabbed her chest from the bruising, that it was distinct and there. At the time, they called the police, who wrote a report about it. David Paulides did an interview with Art Bell in 2015, in which they discussed another case about a 19-year-old girl who had not returned for supper after visiting a neighbor. Search parties were sent out. The girl later turned up at the house and collapsed, crying. She had made a detour to climb a ferry fort. The girl tried to leave the fort, but felt a muscular jerk from within her body. Before she realized it, she was walking in the opposite direction, as if controlled by something else. Something other than herself. When she tried to get out again, she felt like there was an invisible barrier preventing her from leaving this place. Darkness fell, and she became desperate. She could hear the search party outside where she was, but they couldn't see or hear her. Eventually, the barrier seemed to lift, and she made her way home. These are just some of the cases covered by David Paulides, and there are, at this point, thousands more. What do you think, guys? Is there something paranormal in our national forests across the planet, kidnapping people, with the ability to control minds in a way that resembles the strongest type of hypnotism? Let me know what you think in the comments. And thank you for watching Murder, Monsters, and Mysteries. If you enjoyed today's video, please like and subscribe, as we'll be uploading more regularly.